For centuries, the Iberian Peninsula operated as a military pressure cooker. Dozens of kingdoms spent generations locked in competition, fighting for control over the same few inches of dirt. This topographical map shows the structural limits of that competition. To the west, south, and east, these kingdoms were walled in by the ocean. To the north, they were sealed off by the Pyrenees. This geographic confinement meant that any kingdom seeking an advantage over its neighbors eventually had to look past the physical boundaries of the peninsula itself. The Kingdom of Navarre occupied a vital position on that northern wall. They controlled the only viable pass through the Pyrenees, acting as a human choke point between France and the rest of the peninsula. To survive being squeezed between superpowers, Navarre adopted unusually flexible social policies. They protected Jewish and Muslim populations fleeing persecution elsewhere, drawing in the diverse intellectual and commercial skills needed to keep a small state functional. They also maintained their sovereignty by empowering female rulers to command the state. Queens regnant like Joan d'Albret wielded the political authority necessary to negotiate complex alliances that kept larger empires at bay. When diplomacy failed, Navarre relied on a militarized culture. They specialized in training and exporting elite mercenaries, turning their local defensive needs into a professional service used across Europe. This constant state of military readiness and political agility allowed Navarre to persist in an environment where smaller states were typically absorbed or destroyed. Further south, the internal borders were guarded by the Spanish orders, highly organized groups like the Order of Santiago and the Order of Calatrava. These were wealthy institutions of crusading warrior monks. They were designed for the specific purpose of reclaiming land from Islamic empires and defending those new frontiers. By the late 15th century, the Reconquista was ending, and these orders faced a structural crisis. They possessed immense wealth and a massive standing military, but the peninsula had run out of territory to annex. This idle military capacity was a liability. The crown now faced the reality of thousands of professional warriors and vast treasuries with no more local enemies to fight, creating an internal instability that threatened to destabilize the entire region. The solution emerged in 1415 when Prince Henry of Portugal led the conquest of Ceuta, a key port on the North African coast. At Ceuta, Henry gathered intelligence on the Saharan trade routes. As this ancient map illustrates, the interior of Africa was seen as an impenetrable barrier, making the movement of gold and resources by land both slow and dangerous. As administrator of the Order of Christ, Henry held the keys to a vast Crusader treasury. He redirected that capital away from land-based holy war and into the systematic development of cartography and maritime science. The Maritime Revolution was funded by this repurposed Crusader wealth, a direct tactical pivot from religious warfare to a naval bypass of the Sahara. That bypass required a new type of vessel engineered for the hostile Atlantic, the Caravel. While older ships used overlapping clinker planks, the Caravel utilized Carvel planking, placing boards flush, edge to edge. This streamlined hull reduced water resistance. They paired this with the triangular lateen sail, an air force generating forward propulsion against the wind. The Caravel was a technological tool designed for a specific purpose, to navigate the open water and escape the geographic trap of the peninsula. To make the return trip from the south, Portuguese sailors discovered the Volta de Mar, or the turn of the sea. This technique involved steering ships away from the safety of the coast. To return home, sailors had to head far out into the deep Atlantic to catch the westerly winds that would carry them back to the European coast. Success required trusting navigational math over the side of land, trading the visible shoreline for the predictable patterns of oceanic winds. The ship eventually evolved into the Caravel Redonda, using square sails designed to cross the deep, open ocean at high speeds. The map expanded almost instantly. European movement jumped from local coastal raids to transatlantic voyages that linked the entire globe. A region once defined by closed mountain passes and fixed borders now sat at the center of a boundless maritime trade network. Global exploration was the byproduct of a specific spatial pressure, a breakout triggered by the exhausted borders and religious finances of the Iberian Peninsula.